Now, it's talk time, and we are joined by management consultant and budget analyst, Tilewa Adebajo. Is here with us in the studio. It's good to have you join us right now.
Good morning.
Good morning. And joining us from Abuja is the spokesman of the House of Representatives, Abdulrazak Namdas. Honorable, it's good to have you on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you so much. Good to have you too.
Okay. Now, let's start with you, Tilewa, in the studio. The budget issues between the legislature and the executive is one thing Nigerians have been talking about. Did we have to come to a level where there seemed not to be a direction on way forward for the budget implementation, on signing generally?
Well, I think what is important to realize is that we need to understand exactly what this budget process is all about. First of all, it is the prerogative and the purview of the executive and the president to originate a budget. The legislative arm of government's role in the budget process is at best oversight. So that's one thing we have to understand from the fundamental perspective. Now, from time to time, there could be some constituency projects which some of the legislators will try to introduce. And the term we use for that is pork barrel, to be able to satisfy the aspiration of some of the legislators that they are bringing something from the center to their constituencies from time to time. And this is something that is actually political in nature, and depending on what the president is looking for, they can reach a compromise as to which one of these projects get to work. Having said that, I think it's important also to realize that a budget director has been fired during this process. And the reason why that budget director was fired, and quite a lot of directors within the budget ministry were shuffled to other departments, was because not only of the padding that we talked about, but the issues around what was in the budget that the president developed and what eventually ended up in the House. So there's really nothing new here, and somebody else has paid the price for this. So a project of this nature, this project was not even started by this government, and this Calabar Lagos Rail project was a very critical part of this president's agenda, and of course the negotiations in China.
Okay, we have Abdulrazak Namdas in Abuja. Really, can you just clear the air for us? Let's start from the basic. Why is this controversy?
It's not.
All right, Abdulrazak, if you can hear me, let me ask one more time. My colleague here is asking you, if you can hear me now, why the controversy in the House of Reps at this time? Can you give us a perspective as to what these issues are?
Yes, I think I wouldn't say we have a controversy per se. What we have is that we have a budget that has been initiated by Mr. President, and it has been laid before the joint sittings of the National Assembly. We went through the document with the very hope that we intended to pass this document on the 25th of February. But you are all aware that even the chief executives of set of the MDAs came before the National Assembly and were practically disowning the document that was before us, saying that they didn't own this document. And in the process, the presidency themselves decided to fire some individuals who they felt padded the budget or tampered with the budget. In our opinion, we have worked with the document that was submitted to us before the joint sitting of the National Assembly. This idea that a rail project of Calabar to Lagos was removed from this budget is not true, because I have had cause to display the copy of the budget that was submitted before us, and even journalists went through this budget. They discovered that there is nowhere that the Calabar Lagos rail project was provided for. And we make bold to say all the time that it is not a minister that will come through the back door to submit before a committee a proposal estimate for budget. It has to come from the Mr. President directly. Okay, we have done what is good, and if Mr. President feels that there is something wrong in the budget, it is for him to let us know. He can even submit the supplementary budget. That is allowed by law.
So really, your grouse really is that this inclusion is coming from the minister or the ministry, as it were, not directly from the presidency. Is that the grouse?
Yes, it's not from the president, because every member of the National Assembly, particularly in the House of Reps, 360 of us, have copies of this particular document. And therefore, when a bill is referred to a committee, at that level, it is not all the members will come back together. So somebody cannot smuggle a document at that stage. And if that is allowed, it is what people call we are tampering with the budget. Some people call it padding and things like that. If that is allowed to sustain, next year, a lot of ministers will come with their proposals, and they will not come at the right time. They will wait until when it is at the committee stage before they come and smuggle in certain documents. And that we realize that it will change the vision of Mr. President. We are clearly going to work with Mr. President, and we ensure that we work accordingly. But people should make sure that there is nothing like Calabar Railway project. I can assure you that.
Okay, now, Tilewa, let me come back to you on this. There was also the controversy on the issue of the transmission of the details of the budget from the National Assembly to the presidency. Now, in ideal terms, should there be submission or transmission in different, the budget goes first and then the details go later?
Well, I think it's just a question of process.
Okay.
I think what is important is that obviously the president wants to work with the details because this is his first budget. And I think we need to remove the focus from all this process because the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee have access to the budget minister and these ministers directly, and they have aides that they could sit down and work together to iron out any differences. I don't think these issues should necessarily come out to light of the public. It's a process, and there'll be the back and forth. So if you send out the summary of the budget to the president, that's fine, and you back it up with the details later, and the president can consolidate and decide if everything is there. So I think what we need to focus on really is the issues around what this budget needs to do for the Nigerian economy. Yeah. Nigerian economy is in a recession. Its growth projections have been reduced to 2.3% GDP growth this year, as opposed to 6.57% we used to enjoy 3 years ago. So it's very important that we pass this budget properly, and the stimulus this budget is trying to provide to kickstart and jumpstart the growth in this economy is very important. It's 6 trillion naira, $30 billion. It's the largest budget in the history of this country at a very critical time of our economy. So we need to get it right. And all these issues, as far as I'm concerned, are just distractions, because these are internal issues that can be resolved by email and telephone calls.
Okay, Mr. Namdas, if you heard our guest in the studio here saying the Nigerian people are the ones suffering this whole hulabaloo going on with the budget, would you want to sheath your sword as the lawmakers bow to pressure, as it were, and get this inclusion in so the budget can be passed and we'll move on so Nigerians can enjoy a benefit of democracy?
No, I think clearly, let me say that we are not frustrating any process. What we are doing really is to ensure that Nigerians get what they want. We are elected by the people, and the president is also elected by the people, and therefore we must be seen to work on the same page. But I must say something very clearly. Once it is not the legislators that initiate budgets, it is the presidency that will come with budget estimates and proposals. Frustrating any process. What we are doing really is to ensure that Nigerians get what they want. We are elected by the people, and the president is also elected by the people, and therefore we must be seen to work on the same page. But I must say something very clearly. Once it is not the legislators that initiate budgets, it is the presidency that will come with budget estimates and proposals. It is now left to us to now appropriate funds according to the constitutional provision of the National Assembly. But what we are saying is that if you don't come with an initiative, it is not fair to say if the presidency did not initiate a project, it will be unfair for people to say, look, you remove what it's not there. I think what I'm saying is that, in our opinion, and once we have a budget estimate before us, we try to appropriate funds in a diligent and in line with the policies and programs of the government.
Yeah, we
As I
understand
said,
that. We
if
understand
President
that.
feels
Mr. Nam, we understand the whole process. We are saying, in the name of peace, for the development of the country, would you want to work with the presidency and get things running?
No, we are already on the same page with the president. We are already on the same page with the president. What we are saying is that the president has an agenda to fight corruption, to diversify the economy, to ensure that he fight insecurity. We have the 8th legislative agenda also to fight corruption, to assist the president, make laws in a manner that the security is provided for, and there is diversification of the economy. As I speak, myself, I passed a resolution, I brought a motion, and a resolution was passed about diversifying the economy, ensuring that we don't over-rely on petroleum. We must rely on non-oil sector. All these things is part of what Mr. President wants. We are not fighting with Mr. President. We are working together, and Nigeria will have value for what they have.
All right. Now, Abdul Razak, let me ask you this before we let you go. Now, we expect, or Nigerians generally expect, to see a perfect harmony, saying that there is the same political party within the presidency and the National Assembly, absolute majority in the National Assembly. Nigerians expect to see perfect harmony between the two arms of government.
We have no issue. I think what is happening is that there is no serious rift between the executive and the legislature, as I can speak. Between man and God, the president has not clearly stated that, look, I am not going to sign this budget. The president, even the presidency, issued a statement that we have not rejected the 2016 budget. People are trying to make issues out of this budget to create crisis between the legislature and the executive. Can you, as a journalist, tell me one particular thing that the presidency requested that has not been granted by the National Assembly? When the presidency brought in the supplementary budget early in last year in November, we passed this budget with a speed of light. When the presidency brought the list for its advisors and ministers, the Senate worked on these things very fastly. Can anybody tell me what is that Mr. President requested for the National Assembly and that we turn it down?
Except for this one now that you have not granted.
There's nothing that we have not granted. We have made it clear. We are in the era of social media. We are in the era where the presidency, as I speak, even when I display a copy of the budget that this thing has not included, the presidency has not disproved what I've said. And nobody in the presidency has issued a statement to the contrary that, look, this thing is in the budget. And if it is, it should be published, it should be shown to us, we will apologize to Nigerians.
All right, Abdul Razak, we'll still come back to you on this. Let me come to you now, Tilewa. Analysts have proven, I was asking this question earlier on, that the deficit in Nigeria is multi-sectoral and monies have been allocated to different sectors of the economy. Now, if this budget is passed, what area should be most priority for the government, the kind of one that will impact the people the most before others begin to trickle in?
Well, I think quite clearly, I think let's just going back from what the honorable member of the House of Reps has said. I think the problem they have was the fact that the particular project did not follow the due process. It came from the minister and not through the budget office. That's what I get from what he's saying.
Yes.
And obviously, I think it's important that when the minister comes back from China, he also states his position as to exactly what happened. But like I said, I think the resolution is quite clear. And I think phone calls, emails will solve this problem. Going back to what you said about the issues with this budget, the key priority of government really is to focus on capital expenditure as opposed to financing the deficit, using the deficit or using debt to finance a recurrent expenditure. There's a heavy focus now on using capital expenditure and using the deficit to finance infrastructure development. So the key areas that have priority, as you can see from the budget, are the infrastructure ministry, which is power, housing, and works. So that is the key priority of government. and the sense that if you can pump money into these sectors, I think you can create the sort of inclusive growth that we're looking for that will create employment. Because we have a challenge. As you can see, inflation is now close to 13%, if not over 13%. And if you take a look at some of these baskets, especially the inflation basket for a place like Lagos, it's clearly over close to 14%. These are the issues in terms of how critical this budget is. The government also has some challenges in the sense that our debt profile has gone up. In the last 1 year, we've seen 2 trillion in deficit from last year, another 2 trillion this year. So within a year, we're looking at 4 trillion in deficit financing. So our debt profile is going up from about $60 billion to $80 billion. We're now spending 40% of our revenues on debt service. That strategy clearly is not sustainable. And if we do not diversify our revenue base, especially the non-oil, we're going to have major challenges going forward to sustain this deficit financing.
Okay, how do we really, because most of the time we have instructions, diversify. How do we diversify?
How do we diversify? Well, it's about creating the policies. Now we have a 6 trillion budget. We now have to put in the policies in place to support this budget. As you can see, I think last week we had some information on a 33-point agenda that the Vice President released, talking about how they tend to intervene in every sector of the economy. What I'd like to see is more detail on these agendas to be able to become more specific. And more importantly, if you can put the right policies in place, because the challenge we have now is that business confidence is low, investor confidence is low. We need to be able to improve that investment. If we pass this budget and we implement it properly, you boost business confidence, you boost investor confidence. And if we can now support this with clearly articulated trade, industrial, and investment policies, especially policies around export incentives, then you can begin to see clear diversification. So the key word is the I word, implementation.